I thought I'd make a video about a question that I got from a fella by the name of Arman Hussein. I'm hoping I'm saying your name correctly. But he basically asked about squat mobility for taller guys. Can taller guys reach ATG squats kind of like smaller guys? The first thought that I had was, yeah, you can, but it's going to take you a lot of time, a lot more time than somebody of a smaller stature. The first thing that I kind of think about is the Chinese weightlifters. They're basically built to squat. They're very short femurs, long torsos, and they seamlessly get into the squat position. It's just they are basically genetically, predisposed to squat really well. Whereas somebody from, like, say, Sudan, who has, they generally have really long legs and really short torsos. Somebody of that kind of stature would theoretically have a lot more difficulty reaching arse-to-grass squats. So the question is, what do you do? How do you get to these positions as a taller lifter? The first thing I want to say is, obviously stretching in general is kind of like the prescription. A lot of people say longer muscles tend to stretch into longer positions, and then you can theoretically get into those positions. But I've mentioned this before, that squatting arse-to-grass, squatting depth, is not just about mobility. It's about strength at end ranges. So I've already spoken about in the previous video about the strength of a Psoas, keeping your anterior pelvic tilt at the bottom. That discussion was in the butt wink video. So if you are rounding really, really badly, kind of at the end range of the squat, and your tail is kind of tucking underneath, my recommendation in that sense is to strengthen the psoas, because the psoas is what pulls the lumbar spine into kind of anterior pelvic tilt. So somebody of really long femurs and just tall in general would have to have even stronger psoas to prevent rounding of the spine. The second thing is you need healthier ankles. And I've said this in the past, that you need, hips and ankles are very much related. People think, okay, when I look at myself in the mirror, the first thing that kind of happens when I reach the end range of a squat is the heels pop up off the ground. It will be intuitive to just think to yourself, okay, this is what the problem is, I need to attack the ankles. I've said this in the past, I'll say it again, every single time I kind of attacked the ankles, I never really got anywhere. The very next day, my ankle mobility would just basically go back to square one. It's almost like all the work that I did the day before just goes to the toilet. So I don't tend to tell people to work on their ankles. I know there's a lot of people out there, with using bands and distractions and pulling the tibia back and kind of allowing the joint to do all that sort of stuff. I get the theory behind it, but the moment that band is removed, that joint is going to go back to the same position. Why? Because there are soft tissues within the ankle which are applying force for that ankle to be in the position that it is. And those soft structures is what I want to emphasize on. Why are those soft tissue structures doing what they're doing? They're doing what they're doing is because of certain tensile forces, if you will. I've always said that if you clear up, if you return the strength of your hamstring to where it should be, if you return the glute strength where it should be, your calves will let go. Your calves will let go because of the fascia. It's all connected. You can't just think ankle in isolation. It's not the case. A lot of us have screwed up hips because we're doing what we're doing right now, what I'm doing right now. That's sitting. Your hip flexors are really, really short. Your pelvis is posteriorly tilted. Like I'm rounding my spine, and then just people spend 8 hours a day like that. And then they drive to the gym and they expect to get into an arse-to-grass position. You can't reverse 8 hours of sitting within an hour training session. So what you need to do, our training session of stretching, what you need to do is work actively to return strength into some of these structures. The hamstring, the psoas, the glute. Once you return that, your hips will kind of get back into alignment, and then everything will be better. Couple that with some stretching, not static stretching, but stretching that I already mentioned before, with standing RDLs, where you kind of go slowly down with a light to moderate weight. You feel the stretch, you keep your back tight, and then you go back up. These are the things that will work for everyone, not just short lifters or tall lifters. I'll tell you one story. I'm a big basketball fan, as if you guys have been watching me, you know that I wear all these jerseys and I have followed basketball for a very long time. I remember a video of Dennis Rodman when he was playing for the Chicago Bulls. It was a video, a photo or a video. I remember him clearly, where he kind of, like, the play went kind of into offense, and he stayed. So he got the rebound, threw it out. It was a counter attack, and they scored on the other end. And he basically stayed at his end of the court, and he squatted down. Now this is a 6'8", 6'9" dude, taller than a lot of us, most of us, in fact. He squatted down, ass to grass, okay, with no problem, and he just kind of waited for play to come back, and then he stood up and he continued on the plane. This is a 6'8", 6'9" guy. Dennis Rodman was somebody that was known to be a gym rat, somebody that worked really, really hard on his fitness and mobility. And there was another video where he was basically doing a split, a forward split, very, very close to like sitting his ass down on the ground. So he was very, very flexible. He was very, very mobile at 6'8", 6'9". So what does that mean? That means that you need to work really, really hard on your mobility, more so than a small lifter. If you're tall, you need to spend the majority of your time on your mobility if the goal is to hit ass to grass. The structures that I already mentioned are the psoas, the hamstring and the glute. Now one test that I like to do and tell people about is this one. So about the psoas, right? The psoas is a muscle that originates from your lower back, right? Goes from your lower back, that's where it fans out. It comes from T12 to L5. All of the vertebrae, kind of like a fan muscle. Each vertebra has like a strand of it. And it comes both sides, and it inserts it to your femur. And its primary function, the iliopsoas, is to do this. Raise your femur up, or hip flex. So what I've done in the past with people is when I've kind of tried to make the point of not just stretching your muscles, but actually working on the strength of your muscles, is to do a psoas strength test. I did not read anywhere this. I didn't, get it from anywhere. I just kind of worked on it over time, and it made sense that when I walk into my shed or garage for the first time, I would just basically do this test, and I would know if I'm going to have a really good squatting day or not. I still use this to this day. And the test is this. I just basically come in here without any warm-ups or anything, and I just lift my knee up like this. Some days when my core is weak, when my psoas is feeling weak or tired, whatever the case might be, or when I'm feeling exhausted, I would lift my leg and I would get to back here. And I physically cannot do it anymore without kind of like rounding over and doing this sort of business. So if you can, for example, not get up to even parallel, right, with the ground, with your femur, you can bet your bottom dollar that you're not going to be able to squat as well. You need to be able to have the muscular strength to be able to hold that position without weight on your back. Putting weight on the back is not going to make it any easier for you. It's going to make it even harder for you. So you need to have the ability. And I've seen people with really, really strong hip flexors. Like if you think about some of the people like gymnasts who hang off the rings and they do the L sit, and they bring both legs up, freaking like, or V sit I think it's called, and they just basically like do a leg raise, and it's like their knees are like next to their face, straight legs, straight spine. That is hip flexor strength, man. Like these people can do hanging leg raises like it's until the cows come home. So if you're a taller lifter, if you're any lifter really, it applies more to the taller lifters because the femur length and whatever. Lift your leg up like this and see how long you can hold it. If you can't hold this position, say for 30 seconds, you know what you need to do. You need to train your hip flexor. How do you train your hip flexor? Well, one that I really like to do is this one. Really simple. Can you see me? You just basically do this, right? It's called a knee raise, basically. And hold it at the top. If you're really, really good, I've already worked my hip flexor today, so I'm kind of hot and I'm tired, but you can, lift your legs up as well. So, you guys know what to do with the hamstrings, with the RDLs. Now you know what to do with the psoas. You can also do this. I mean, if that's too hard, the hanging leg raise, you can just simply do this. Like hold on to something here and just rep it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. I've done sets of 50 in the past with this. That is true. That is true core strength that applies to what we're trying to do here. Doing crunches, your rectus abdominis. Yeah, you can do it, but the main muscles which we need to strengthen here is the psoas and the iliopsoas. So I hope that kind of clears it up for you. Don't focus on the ankles. You can if you have ample time. I know that I tend to kind of turn off of things that don't really work for me. But if you're somebody that just wants to tick every box, go for it. You can work on your ankles, stretch your calves, whatever the case might be. For me, I never do this. I'll just tell you how it is. Like, I never work on my ankles, ever. All I ever think about is my core strength, the psoas. Like I said to you, I walk in, I test my psoas. If my psoas is feeling shit, I know I'm not going to be able to load the squat. It happens every single time. Some days I walk in and I can freaking really tuck my knee all the way up here, and I'm like, damn, I know today's going to be good, because I have the strength to be able to stabilize my spine. Remember that hip flexion is primarily done by the psoas. So in a squat, when we're going down, we are basically hip flexing. The force is basically being resisted by the posterior chain and the quads, but the opposite group, antagonist of those movers, needs to be strong in order for the agonist to do its work. So it's a yin and a yang. Never forget about the psoas. Our body is a lot stronger at hip extension, so hamstring, glute, much stronger muscles than the poor old psoas. And no one ever works the psoas, ever. So you need to spend a lot of time on your psoas in order you to have a really strong squat. And then what you will see, this is like magic, what you will see is that you will start getting lower and lower in the squat without even having to stretch all that much. It's remarkable. I mean, if you get anything out of this video, just look up psoas. Don't take my word for it. Just look up people that have like credentials and just read about the psoas. It's a muscle that it's not really talked about much because it's not sexy. Like the six pack or big quads or big hamstrings and big glutes. But it's like a silent ingredient to athletic endeavors, whatever you want to call it. I'll tell you another thing. If you really want to see, psoas being trained hardcore, look at sprinters. If you think about sprinting, it's all about hip flexion, right? It's about, smashing your legs forward as quickly as you can. And the hip flexors is what they need to train in order to sprint quickly. I hope that kind of answers your question. Yeah, psoas, you got to strengthen that bugger and add length into your hamstring and your glute through what I already spoke about before in the previous video with the RDLs. Thanks guys, I hope that helps. Cheers.